Coming up on Regarding Men, why is Robert Muller lying about men?
Hello, one and all. I'm Paul Elam with paulelam.com, and I am joined as always by Janice Fiamengo of the Fiamengo Files and Tom Golden of MenAreGood.com. And this is
Very good.
Regarding Men, where we hold men in high regard and where red pill isolation comes to die. God, did I say all that without stumbling?
All of it.
A miracle, a
We like
miracle.
it.
Now let's see if we can say men are good at the end of this discussion. Hey, folks, today we're on Psychology Today, which recently published an article by a PhD named, I think, Robert Muller, titled 12,000 Angry Men. And if you couldn't guess already, this is one more sort of obsequious mental health prostitute jumping out there with a threat narrative about men online talking about their lived experience honestly, talking about their lives and sorting out problems. And of course, this is 2021, so we actually have a mental health profession. This is a reviewed article, by the way. It got the seal of approval from Psychology Today's editors, explaining how men talking about their problems are really a threat to women. No no kowtowing to women there, no unfair bullshit there. And of course, he starts out the article with the guy in Toronto that drove the van and killed a bunch of people. And of course, that's how you set up a threat narrative. First, you need a crisis, a disaster that happened. And Tom, you're shaking your head.
Well, he was a man, Paul.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, God, and so were the people that made that van.
Yeah, there
I'll
you
lay
go.
you dollars.
That's right.
There's something to investigate there. But again, once again, we're in a scenario that, I mean, we're trying to laugh about this. There's nothing about this that's funny at all. Nothing humorous. It's terrible that when men start talking about their problems honestly, and guess what, guys? A lot of men's problems are expressed and discovered in their relationships with women. And some of their problems are the women in their relationships. That is reality. We wouldn't deny that for women. If women went to any psychologist and said, you know, I've married a couple of alcoholics and everything, and, you know, they would say, well, we need to talk about how you choose men, look at your life, you know, and sort of, you know, what are the warning signs? How do we keep you safe? If men talk about some of the avaricious bitches that they've gotten connected to in their lives that have made false accusations against them or taking all their property or alienated them from their children, as it happens with many of these men, then instead of being able to go to the mental health profession and get empathy and understanding and support for working through their problems, they get shame disgracefully from mental health professionals, people who are hanging a shingle out there purporting to actually help people with problems and instead try to shame, humiliate, and exploit their problems so that they can please women, which is their primary bread and butter of their practices. I could be wrong about this, and if I am, I'm sure Tom or Janice or both of them will say something. But I just wanted to throw that out there. I know that we've got some quotes from this article, but the first thing I wanted to do was really express my serious disgust with this kind of human being and how many of them are in the mental health professions doing this very thing. It's just awful. These people should not have licenses. They should not be able to practice mental health services. They should be banished. And I think probably criminally prosecuted. When people cross boundaries, like if you're a psychotherapist and you end up in a sexual relationship with one of your clients, in most states, you can go to prison for that. And rightfully so, because you're abusing your position of authority and power in that person's life and exploiting them at their most vulnerable. So when people end up in jail for that, I'm clapping my hands. That's fine. But we've got a profession now that is for lack of a better term, just one rolling Gillette commercial after another.
Yes.
Bashing men, humiliating them for their experiences. And then when men dare to speak up, the first thing they do is say, you're a threat to a, we need to silence you. That's mental health treatment. That's what we're getting from these clowns these days. And it's absolutely disgusting. Robert Muller should be absolutely ashamed of his very existence.
Amen.
Yeah. No, I can't disagree with you, Paul. It is a shocking article. Well, for one thing, it is one of the least coherent and informative articles that I've ever read, even on Psychology Today, which isn't really a very serious magazine of psychology anymore, if it ever were. But if you went to this article expecting to read something and to learn something about men's rights, online activists, or just the manosphere in all of its different manifestations, you certainly would be sorely disappointed, and you'd come away very puzzled about what this movement, what the manosphere is, and what animates the various groups that occupy it. Because basically he just says, well, there's all these different groups, and he talks about incels. He talks about MGTOW. He talks about the red pillars. And he says essentially that they're all linked only by their misogyny. And so this article fits into a pretty tired genre that we've seen now every time the subject is the manosphere and its alleged creation of mass killers. It falls into this same pattern. One, there's an emphasis on men's anger. Oh dear, men aren't allowed to be angry. It's not really clear what emotions men are allowed to express. And this is very ironic because Professor Muller, professor of psychology at York University, is supposed to be an expert in trauma and is interested in the fact that men don't open up about their trauma or the difficulty of opening up about trauma. So he's already made it clear that men are not allowed to be angry because men's anger is somehow dangerous. I don't know what emotions men are allowed to express in our culture today. Concern for women, I suppose, and perhaps some justified shame at their toxic white privilege or male privilege. And so there's that. We always have to focus on anger. Then we always have to have statements about how men are wrongly angry at women or at feminism, that they are blaming all their problems on women. And then number three, the related issue after we have the anger, which is very dangerous, and then we have the men wrongly blaming all of their problems on women. The third issue that always comes up is that men are angry because they have a sense of sexual entitlement. They allegedly feel entitled to women for sex. And, they need to be shamed for that. And they need to have it hammered into their head as if they're not already aware that they are not entitled to sex, even though one of these groups essentially exists to talk about men's feeling that they never will have a sexual relationship or a relationship of love with any woman ever in their lives. So it's this is an article where, I mean, if someone asked me, what do you think what are the qualities that a psychologist should manifest? I would say, one, obviously empathy for the people that he studies and works with and tries to help. And two, critical analysis, the ability to really deeply understand people's individual psychologies and problems. And I don't think he manifests either of those here. There's zero empathy and there's zero actual understanding of the various groups that he glibly talks about.
Yeah,
there's zero attempt at understanding any of this.
Yeah, therapists are supposed to know how to listen. You know, it's like, that's basic. You got to learn how to listen. And if the guy had listened to his own article, he might have learned something, because the article really talked about, the incels and their difficulties in not having any kind of sexual relationship and the frustration that is. And it talked about something, I forget what else, but there was a number of things that they talked about, how these guys are in trouble. But yet what he does is he conflates that with violence and says, oh, these violent men, they're just trying to, to use women. They're so angry, they're misogynistic, and they're just going to try and use women. It's like, wait a minute, you missed your own article. What's wrong with this picture? Oh, it's crazy.
You missed everything. I've never had, in all my years of working with men, I've never had a man come to a session with me and say, none of those bitches will get off the pussy for me.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
They owe me sex.
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody ever say anything close to that.
Ditto.
But what would I do let's play what if for a minute. What would I do if I did? What if I had a man come into my office and say, I try to connect with women and the bitches won't have anything to do with me, and I'm never going to get laid, and I hate the way they treat me, and I hate men who get laid and who are successful with women. I don't like all that. The first thing I'm going to do in that is try to connect with him and get an understanding and get him to talk about his loneliness and isolation. That is the absolute first thing I'm going to do, because at least he's telling me he's lonely. He's telling me he's isolated.
Yes.
So what can I do right then? I can try to connect to him. So at least for that hour, he doesn't feel isolated. And then I want him to talk more and more about his isolation. And when was the first time he felt those feelings? Because it probably wouldn't have been with women. It probably would have been somewhere in his childhood.
Right.
But there's no effort by this guy whatsoever. Nothing. Yep. It's like, you're not expressing the appropriate emotions, so I'm going to virtue signal my way into popularity with women by persecuting you publicly on a platform for mental health. This is why I've just, I would like to give this guy any kind of benefit of the doubt, and I can't. I don't think he's misguided. I think this is evil in action. It's pathogenic therapy in action, and it's therapy that's been politicized.
Yes.
And of course.
Yeah, I agree with your evil connection, but I think that basically he's singing the same song that the academics sing. I mean, this is what Division 51 does. This is what the psychologists do. I mean, this is over and over again. We hear the same thing. So he's one of many, and he was probably trained that way when he went to school, with this crazy stuff they talk about.
No, it's just terrible. And even within the terms that it sets for itself, which is to define masculinity as a problem, and right away to link any man who is involved in the manosphere in any form with the tiny minority of men who have committed mass violence. We don't know whether their mass violence had anything to do with their online activity.
Right.
Did it cause it? Well, obviously that's impossible to say. It might have actually prevented them from acting out of their anger for some months or years. Right. Who knows, what the relationship between the two was, but he right away has to make this link. And he is essentially shaming any man who has been involved in any way with online discussions. But even within the terms that he sets for himself, what he says is actually demonstrably wrong and misleading in many cases. He starts off with Alec Manassian, who is the Canadian, the Toronto man who drove a van into a bunch of people on a crowded Toronto street and ended up killing 10 people, 8 women and 2 men. And he says right away that his motivation was hatred of women, taking revenge on women. And but that is not actually the whole story by any means. I didn't follow. Manassian has now been tried. His attack happened a number of years ago. He's now gone to trial, and he's been convicted. He's been found guilty, criminally responsible. His defense team alleged that because of his autism, that he wasn't really criminally responsible, that he lacked empathy. He couldn't feel empathy for other people. And he's actually changed his story, though he initially did say that he acted out of anger against women and against men who were successful with women. He later said it had to do with job stress. It had to do with his developmental disorder. We know that he had a speech impediment. He experienced bullying. He experienced extreme social isolation. All these are the sorts of things that you would expect a psychologist to be really interested in.
And compassionate for.
And yet all he can see is a certain type. And he's interested in fitting Alec Minassian into this type of the deranged incel killer who's a threat to women. And of course, he tells us that Minassian had contact, or claims he had contact, with two other mass killers, two incel killers. One, of course, is Elliot Rodger, that everybody's heard of. The other fellow I have heard of, but I don't know much about him, Chris Harper Mercer, who also killed a number of people in Oregon, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. But anyway, I mean, that's what Minassian claimed in his discussion with police after he had committed his mass attack. But they're both dead. We have no idea whether he actually had any contact with them or not. And from that very thin evidence, this Muller draws the conclusion that online radicalism was entirely responsible for his murderous act. Minassian spoke to police for hours, and a Canadian newspaper, the National Post, got the recording and did a big number on things that he said in his conversation with the police. And of course, they didn't tell us everything, just the juicy bits that they thought would make great copy. And of course, they did focus on his declaration of himself as an incel and his anger against women, etc. But one of the things he said that I thought was so interesting and important in relationship to this whole topic was that he said that he had met several people online who felt as he did, but none of them, he felt, had the courage to do what he did. In other words, actually kill people.
Right.
Now, that is so key. Notice that. Several, not dozens, not hundreds, not 12,000. Yeah, several. And yet even those tiny several did not have the courage to act. So what kind of a murderous movement is this? Not very murderous. And the statement in which Muller links Minassian and Rodger and Harper Mercer to the mass of men who talk about their problems and their issues and share ideas online is such a weaselly, dishonest fudge of a statement that it should get an award for being, the most unethical statement made about men's rights activism. Could we just put it up on the screen, Tom? Because I just thought it was
Which one are we talking about? Is it this one?
Dishonest. No, the other one where he says that men like Minassian are not part of a minority. He says, but these violent outbursts, mainly talking about Minassian, are not isolated to a few. They're related, what a fudge word, to a deeper issue, a patchwork group of anti-feminist online communities collectively known as the Manosphere. That is a lie. They are isolated. If they were not isolated, then Robert Muller could name other men who were galvanized and radicalized supposedly online. He can't name any others because they are a tiny minority. And to say they're related to this deeper issue, that's like saying they're related to brushing your teeth in the morning because, the other men also brushed their teeth in the morning. That is such a, it's just such an irresponsible, fudge of the issue, essentially, as we've seen many articles try to do, smearing all men who go online to discuss their legitimate anger at the way the world is set up and biased against them, smearing them all as potential mass killers.
Yes.
It's like it's almost like that we said, okay, Valerie Solanas killed, and he eventually died from the gunshot wound, killed Andy Warhol. And so now, if other women under the feminist umbrella are talking to each other online about their problems, we need to view them as a threat. It's that disingenuous. It's that crazy. And what's worse for me is that we do have things to look at with people who commit these crimes. What I notice over and over again, anecdotally anyway, is that I see what I call the trifecta. There is father absence, there is some position on the autism spectrum somewhere, and a history of being bullied. This happened with Manassian, it happened with Adam Lanza, it happened with Nicholas Cruz, and it's happened with others. But guess what? Yes, if we're going to look at these as antecedents or something that happens leading up to acting out violently, we would have to start looking at fathers being pushed out of the home. We would have to look at the importance of fathers. We would have to see boys that are bullied as victims and actually come to give a damn about them in some way, or instead of waiting for them to get angry about being bullied and then shaming them for expressing that anger, which is what people like Muller are leading the psychological establishment to do, is a moment that we're getting cries for help from these people. And when guys are reaching out online and saying, I'm angry, I'm lonely, I hurt, I feel wronged by life, they need an audience. They need somebody to listen to what they're going through and to at least pretend like they care about it. And instead, they get Robert Mueller.
And
it's
the
no
media.
wonder they're growing up and hurting people.
Yeah. And, he then goes very far afield, allegedly to find reasons why this is happening, why the number of men who are feeling angry. I mean, he actually leaves behind the question of what mass killers have in common and just asks, why are men going online? Why are men expressing anxieties about their relationships with women? Why are men feeling angry about the systems that have been put in place as a result of modern feminism? And, he draws in, there's one fellow, he goes to Cyprus, a professor there who is an evolutionary psychologist, who talks about the fact that up until very recently, at least in terms of the evolution of humankind, most marriages were arranged. And therefore, evolutionary forces have not selected for the ability to attract a mate in men. And this is why supposedly, I thought that was kind of interesting, but very
dumb. Evolutionary forces have not had any influence on men attracting women. Is that what he's trying to say?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I thought it was very. I thought it was.
These must be very easy to get these days.
Yeah, and then there's somebody with a PhD in communications, which is the most nothing degree I think that the modern university offers.
Women's
who tells us that really men are legitimately feeling anxiety about their modern roles, but it's all the fault of capitalism, because capitalism is weakening men's rights as workers, but men are too stupid to realize that. And so instead they project all of their anger and frustration and sense of being not in control of their lives onto women, immigrants, and people of color. That's the standard. Of course, we've seen that articulated over and over again. Never mind that many of the men online talking about these issues are themselves immigrants or people of color anyway. it's ridiculous. And then I think the third one was a woman who had founded an institute for the study of male supremacy. And she found, not surprisingly, that, victim ideology was a part of the overarching narrative of male supremacy, and that was to blame for these men's anxieties. And, they're just horrible.
I had to laugh when I heard that, because the whole of feminism is based on victimhood.
Yeah, I know.
The whole thing, his background, the feminist stuff is all based on we're victims. It's like, okay, if that's really a problem, then feminists should be really the culprits here.
It's obvious that this guy is narrative first, fill in the facts loosely as you
Seems
can
like it.
afterward. Don't bother if it's not accurate. It doesn't matter too much. Just fit that narrative, because that's what he's selling.
Paul, I found myself
jacket and a straw hat.
When I read that article, I kept thinking to myself, has he ever talked to an incel?
Yeah.
Has he ever talked to someone who thinks about the red pill? By the way, take the red pill. Dr. Muller?
Take two of them, and Robert,
in fact,
take all of them.
And I kept saying, no, he couldn't have talked to someone.
That's it, yeah.
Because if he really had, he wouldn't have written that article. Doesn't
I
take
don't
much.
know, Tom. I think he probably would. I think what we're dealing with is an ideologue. He had the book, Marx's book, behind him on his bookshelf.
Yeah.
Go back to the beginning of this, and you'll see Marx and Engels on this guy's bookshelf. This guy is narrative first. I think he could come into one of the Regarding Men meetings and hear from men from all over the world and American immigrants and people of other nationalities talk about what connects them to each other, what unifies them, and describe their problems. And he would come out of it saying, these people are going to murder somebody.
Probably,
He would.
yeah.
That's depressing.
He could well, yeah. I certainly got the sense that he had not spent very much time even surfing around online and in these various chat rooms, because he couldn't even really tell us. I think he thought that men's rights activists, they were defined in his article as those who feel that the system is stacked against them, and therefore they decide to treat women as objects to take revenge.
The article says,
there it is, right.
Believers in the red pill feel that modern feminism created an unfair situation for men, and they must fight back by treating women like objects, using them only for sex.
Hey, Robert, 1972 called. They want their narrative back.
You know what that reminded me of? It reminded me of the women's studies professor that was reviewing the Red Pill movie. Just about
Rebecca Cameron, wasn't her name, or Campbell? I can't remember.
Sullivan. Was it Sullivan?
Yeah, I think it was
Sullivan. That's it. So Rebecca Sullivan at the University of Alberta, who hadn't seen the movie, but went on the CBC to talk about it because somebody at the University of Calgary had tried to show it, and she said that the message of men's rights advocates was, if we could have sex with whomever and whatever we want at any time, then we wouldn't have to rape you.
That's exactly, you remember that. God, that's exactly right. It reminds me of this article in a way. It's that kind of assumption.
I know, it's just this crazy, I don't know. It's so bizarre that he doesn't feel the need to actually do any real research or to bring forward any evidence for the really outrageous, slanderous claims that he's making about men who engage in online discussions and online activism. It's really quite something. I think maybe he was thinking of pickup artists or something, but I don't know. And then he lumps in MGTOW, of course, who are just interested in living lives that aren't.
I doubt if he even knows what the acronym stands for.
I guess not. It's just. Yeah. But then the strangest thing is that the article then ends in a way I wasn't really expecting it to, with this oddly compassionate ending, completely unprepared by anything that has come before, saying that, what is the solution to this? I was expecting he was going to say, we need to round them up, exactly. Give the police more powers to surveil these guys and call them domestic terrorists if they engage in any kind of online misogyny. I was expecting all that kind of thing. And instead he says that the solution is basically human connection. That's what these people need. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm on board with that, but there are absolutely no specifics about how that human connection is going to be forged or encouraged for these guys. And after all of that denunciation of their anger, their bitterness, their misogyny, their hatefulness, their dangerousness, then to offer human connection as the solution, it just was completely incoherent.
I know what happened there. He wrote the article and got to the end and thought, oh, wait a minute, I'm a therapist. Here, let's put something about human connection. There now. Put a little bow on it. There, we're done.
But I had to agree with the ending. I mean, that's so true. If he would just spend some time with some of these men, he would understand some things.
Yeah.
But there would have to be a sincere bone in his body somewhere.
Yeah.
And anybody that right 90% total denunciation and attacking of all these groups without understanding them, and then spout some pablum about human connection at the end. So that's going to undo everything he said. I mean, who the fuck does this guy think? He must really view the world around him as full of very stupid people.
Division 51.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess he must assume that no one reading psychology today will have ever spoken online to any of the men that he's talking about, or that no one will have genuinely investigated any of these movements or cared to understand them.
Correct. But what he knows now is that some of those men found his Facebook page. And there was a notice about this article on his Facebook page, and I don't think there's even one positive comment about the article.
Is that right?
There might be a link somewhere down below to his Facebook page.
There would be.
There probably will be a link to his Facebook page, in case you want to share your thoughts with a good doctor.
There are men who are saying, no, this article's bullshit, and here's why. Boom, da boom, da boom, da boom. So he's getting some feedback. We'll see.
Good.
He hasn't responded to any of it. He's not one little response. So
I've never seen a Division 51 type that ever was capable of learning anything. It's like the entire lot of them have organic brain damage.
And they can't hear. They cannot listen. It's really amazing. When I was on that Division 51 mailing list, I mean, I'd say things and it just wouldn't compute. They wouldn't go in. They'd say that I was a biological determinist, because I said, well, how about testosterone? Do you think that impacts some of men's behavior? Oh, you're a biological determinist. It's crazy.
Don't you know biology is evil and it's a male
concept? It must be. But that's the kind of incapacity they have to hear new things and to be able to take in new data. It's crazy.
And if Dr. Muller, I use that term loosely, watches this, if he gets anything out of this, I hope he gets the understanding that, for decades now, we've heard feminist therapists drone like pipe organs about how men should express their feelings and they need to talk about their feelings. And guess what? When they start to do that, and just like with anybody else that's been wounded, typically the surface emotions you get are angry emotions. When women do that, we cheer them on, and we should. We need to get them to talk about their lived experience so we can get to the pain underneath it, because that pain is always there. But feminist psychotherapists are always going on and on and on about how men should express their feelings. And the moment they do, they get shamed and humiliated by those same professionals. It's awful. And it's why men do not and should not trust psychotherapy as it's being delivered today. They should avoid it at all costs.
It reminds me of it reminds me of the mythopoetic men's movement that was in the 90s, 80s, and 90s, where men were going out in the woods and talking about their unfinished business, talking about their family of origin crap, and talking about, how can I deal with this, and sharing with each other that kind of stuff. And the media caught wind of that and just shamed them, threw them out. Oh, these are men going out, getting naked in the woods and drumming. It's like that's the only thing they'd bring up. They wouldn't talk about how the men were out there really connecting on a personal level with each other and getting bonded. It was just incredible what was happening. And it got shamed, just like it's getting shamed here. You know, and gynocentrism runs over top of the whole damn mess, and it says you can't really listen to men's emotions.
No.
You know? That's the empathy gap, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only appropriate way to be a man is to shit on other men. I mean, that's the clear message from an article like this.
Yeah.
I couldn't have put it better.
I know. I was thinking the same thing, Paul. I was thinking, damn, Janice, well said.
They want white knights to ignore their own issues, ignore their own feelings, stuff everything, and the emotion that they want to hear. They want to hear men outraged at how women are treated. That's what they want to hear. And they don't want to hear anything else. And the moment you ever utter anything else to these so-called mental health professionals, they will persecute you for it, which is exactly what this article is.
Yep. It's true. Tis true. Does that feel better?
I feel better. I feel better.
I know that.
I've been pissed off about this all day, and I shouldn't be, because this is, it's just another business as usual in the mental health professions and in places like Psychology Today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the media just laps it up. You get the same kind of crap from the media that you get from Psychology Today. I mean, it's just this whole gynocentric mess.
Yeah.
Where people can't really hear the truth in men, unless you go to Regarding Men.
Yes, I was going to say, I'd hate to end on such a bad note, but guess what? If you're one of these guys that feels isolated, lonely, you're struggling, you're angry, you're frustrated, come to Regarding Men. You can join for $5 a month, and if you're broke, you can join for free. And we have group meetings every day of the week where you can talk about these issues, and there won't be any clowns like Dr. Muller in there to shame you. You will find your peers will listen to you and give you wonderful feedback. There's tons of collective wisdom in those meetings, and they are very beneficial for the men who go there. Unlike what you're going to get from Division 51, we actually give a damn about what is going on with men today.
And we hold men in high regard, and that's the truth.
Yes, we do.
Because men are good. Had to throw
wow. You said it for all three of us.
I had to throw it in. Oh. And I got it in the right order.
Yeah. Without all the long pauses.
Isn't it, are men good?
Good are men. So we're going to try it anyway?
Yeah, we're going to try it. Men
are
good. Oh, no, we got it right.
There we go.
That sucks.
You guys have a great one. We'll catch you next time.
We're finished. Y'all take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
take care. Bye-bye.